Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this today's webinar on the theme navigating the cyber frontier. This particular webinar, we have two eminent cyber experts, Brigadier Saurabh Tewari and Subimal Bhattacharjee. Uh, Both are probably prominent figures in the cybersecurity field. First, I'll let you know about the SAPI. SAPI is a think tank which was conceived in 2021, and it held its first webinar, open webinar, on 26th October 2021. And since then, we have done a long journey, and roughly 8 webinars we have done events, and this is the 9th in the series. We have been publishing articles, blogs, and other events too. So SAPI had seen a eventful time in last roughly 26 months or so. Recently, SAPI has been given the status, a legal status too, and therefore we can be present in the physical world also. Recently, one of our co-founders, Mrs. Sangeeta Goyal, had the privilege of exhibiting her paintings in London, as the SAPI is separately working in defense transfer technology, border management, public policy, art and culture. So she could display her paintings in Nehru Center in London. Now coming to the today's topic, navigating the cyber frontier. What is the cyberspace? As you know that we are embracing the digital world across our all functionalities, and this usage is deepening day by day. Every day we see new or the other applications coming up, especially with the advent of AI and other such technologies available on the internet. This digitalization is a very important facet. It has become of our life, and we are too dependent on it for any operation, banking, travel, any other. So if it is facilitating us, it has also has a other side too. So the pros are okay, but the cons also have to be dealt with. So that's why there is an issue of regulating the cyberspace, creating ecosystem to fight the cybercrime, etc. We see that some few days ago, I read a news item in editorial of one of the newspaper that there has to be a Ministry of AI also beside the Ministry of IT to study and facilitate the positive effects of the AI and control the negative effects of the AI. So this is the idea which is emerging. That's why need was felt of a separate Ministry of AI. Besides that, we all know that the global major technologies like Google, Meta, etc., have become part of our daily lives. I recently read another issue that there is a concept of cognitive warfare that is happening between nations, wherein they control the social media, they control the perception, and then change the minds of the people. So this is a very important thing to note, and how to channelize this is also a important task, because beside the land, sea, and the air warfare, this is another area where the armed forces or the otherwise in general the public itself has to face it. So we may see the wars happening physical in the world, but this is also another added thing to us. Now, this is where if you see how to control the navigate this cyberspace, we have cybersecurity regulation, and regulation is not a very simple thing. It's a very complex, because there are various nations involved in it. Now these countries have their own considerations, while the digital system is across the country which is running. So we have to consider the regulation in a proper manner, which Subimal will be telling. We have amongst the first speaker. I'll not take much time. Introduce Brigadier Tewari. He is an engineer and BTech in electronics, and was commissioned in Indian Army and has done a vast number of postings and very vast experience too. He has done postings in Lanka, Ladakh, Siachen, Assam, and Punjab. Most important thing about Brigadier Tewari is that he was the project director of Network for Spectrum, a key project introduced by the Army almost 1.5 decades ago. And as part of the Network for Spectrum, the next generation network of the Army was launched. And though he superannuated in July 2023, Army felt it necessary to utilize his services, and he has been requested to serve the Army on a consultant or contractual basis, which he is doing. But another thing is that he is also pursuing the PhD in cybersecurity from Manipal University, but working in CLOS, the Center for Land and Warfare Studies in Delhi. And he is reviewing the ecosystem of the India to fight the cybercrime. He is also MPhil and diploma in management, besides diploma in cyber law. And he has also authored 2 research-based books on the role of technology in military warfare. Over to you, Brigadier Tewari.
Thank you, Gupta sir, for the fine introduction. I think quite a bit has been said by Mr. Gupta about the menace of cybercrime. Today I am going to give you a glimpse of how India is geared up to handle cybercrime, how cybercrime is rising, year on year, and what needs to be done to contain this issue. Without taking much for introduction, I'll share my slides. So, can you see this, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, so my talk today is on review of India's ecosystem in fight against cybercrime. So, growing menace of cybercrime, I don't think I need to elaborate anymore. Mr. Gupta already alluded to it a lot. However, these are just some of the glimpses from the website or newspaper reports in the month of December itself. In the first week of December, some of you may be aware, the National Crime Records Bureau published its annual report called CII, the Crime in India. It publishes annually. So the 2022 report was put in the public domain by NCRB, and thereafter all these headings have come up in the public domain. So 24% rise in cybercrime, fraud, extortion, sexual exploitation, cybercrime see highest spike among cognizable offences in 22. OTP, bank fraud are the topmost. Okay, this goes on and on. I think I'll just broadly flash these slides for you to get a gist of it. None of us needs to be convinced, I think, that cybercrime is a problem at hand. This is just a glimpse of some of the attacks on the critical infrastructure like healthcare or oil or financial sector. This I have taken again from the internet for last 2 years. All of you know there was an attack on the AIM server a few months back. There was an attack on the Safdarjung Hospital server, the ICMR server, CDSL, the Central Depository Services, Oil India, SpiceJet, Tata Power. So you see all the critical sectors have been hacked or attacked at some point or the other. So just to highlight, that if the critical sectors get attacked, then we are in front of a problem, and we need to very seriously look at how to contain this menace. Okay, this slide shows some cyber statistics from a KPMG survey of about a year back. So you can see on the right, there's 32% of crime is due to increased use of, just a minute, yeah, emerging technology, more of it later, lack of security culture and so on. On the top, you can see the percentage-wise what kind of cybercrime took place. Okay, here I have some interesting statistics to share from the NCRB annual report that I was telling you earlier. So if we look from in about the last 4 years, the reports of NCRB. So in 2019, the crime incidents, that is total number of crime, was about 45,000, which has risen in 22 to about 66,000. So almost a 48% increase. The crime rate, that is number of crimes per lakh of population in cybercrime domain, increased from 3.3 to 4.8. Again, a jump of about 50% in last 4 years. Compare this with these statistics of conventional crime. Conventional crime between 2019 to 22 rose just by about 13%, from 51.5 lakh to about 58 lakh. The crime rate increased just by about 9.6%, from 385 to about 422. Also interesting to note the pendency of the cases. So when I say pendency, the NCRB gives the pendency in terms of the investigations which have not been completed by the police department. So in the year 2019 for cybercrime, the pendency was 69%. Vis-a-vis for conventional crime, it was just 25%. So you can see the vast difference between the two domains. Similarly, we see the latest report of 22. The pendency in cybercrime is pegged at 54%, vis-a-vis the conventional crime at about 40%. Talking about conviction rate, so whatever cases go to the court and the court has given its decision, out of that lot, how many have ended up in conviction and in how many the accused have been acquitted. So in 2019, the conviction rate in cybercrime was about 35%, whereas in conventional crime, the conviction rate was 66%. In the latest report, the conviction rate for cybercrime has improved, of course, to about 46%, but in the conventional crime, it remains at about 65%. I'm just sharing these statistics with you just to show you that the ecosystem for conventional crime, of course, it has matured over last few decades, and ever since we got independence, and some of the, in fact, penal codes are all very old, which have just last week they have now been revised with those 3 new bills which the government has taken out. There's a lot the government is doing regarding cybercrime also, which I'll be talking shortly. Okay, so why cybercrime is on the rise? All of us, I think, generally aware. Growing digital economy. We are talking of e-wallets, the digital transactions. Everything is happening online now, whether it is airline reservation, stock trading, banking. The proliferation of broadband. It is the government's mission to. There's a project called BharatNet. National Optical Fiber Network is being rolled out, in which about 6 lakh kilometers of OFC is being rolled out to make broadband reach each and every gram panchayat out of a total of 2.5 lakh gram panchayats. The broadband, if you see the broadband charges, the tariffs, they are also going down. The mobile phone charges, monthly charges are going down. Emerging technologies, of course, are contributing, like Mr. Gupta also said earlier, like AI. We have recently, recently cases about the deep fake of Rashmika Mandana and Alia Bhatt and so on. There have been crimes already being committed using deepfake. People are creating deepfake videos and asking for money from their friends, posing a fake video. A new thing is now emerging. I was discussing with Mr. Gupta the other day, called the zero knowledge proof. So I don't know sir, your secret, but I can prove it to you that I know your secret. So these are very, very dicey domains to be operating in. In addition to that, based on all these new technologies like AI or broadband, the increasing proliferation of broadband connectivity and all, the new concepts are emerging, like Internet of Things. All of us know. So some of us may be operating our air conditioning from our mobile phone. You can operate your geyser sitting in your office. When you start from your office, you can switch on your geyser, you can switch on your air conditioning, so that when you enter the house, the room is cold and the water is hot for you to take a bath. IoT, there is also something called Internet of Behaviors, IOB. This is also a very, very dicey domain where people, their behavior is being detected, and based on that, their preferences, like for example, their sexual preferences, is that by a guy has got a normal sexual preference, or he's a gay, or things like that. Even That is now coming to fore. The concept of smart cities. There is already a smart city project by the government of India, in which certain cities have been, I think, have been nominated to be graduating towards smart city concept. Kota, I know, is one of them. I've seen it personally. Coming to transborder nature, I think all of us are aware that cybercrime knows no boundaries. Sitting in India, I could take control of a computer in Singapore, maybe, or in Croatia, use it to hack a server and or fish, do a phishing attack on someone in Russia, siphon out some money and put it in a bank account in Cayman Islands. Now, how do you tackle such a crime? There are 4 to 5 countries involved. Top of it, there are technologies like IP spoofing or things like dark web and all. The cybercrime regulations of countries are different. So, for example, what may be termed as sexually explicit in France may actually be termed as porn in India. So how do you differentiate and how do you decide actually that whether this is actually a cyber crime or not a cyber crime? The involvement of state actors, I think about a year back in response to a question in the Lok Sabha, the Minister of State for IT, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, mentioned that some of the attacks on the government website have been traced back to Taiwan, to China, to Korea, etc., etc. So these state actors themselves are involved. So how do we tackle that? And therein comes, Mr. Gupta was earlier talking about concept of cyber warfare, etc. So some of the thinkers in this domain are actually talking of 2 different terms called cyber warfare and cyber war. Cyber warfare is when you use cyber as one of the tools in addition to kinetic war as part of the overall umbrella of warfare. Whereas cyber war is when you use only cyber as the weapon and don't use kinetics at all. Something like the cognitive warfare that Mr. Gupta was talking about. So whole lot of issues need to be are actually contributing towards the rise of cybercrime, and we are always playing. The law enforcement agencies are always playing a catch-up game with the criminals because the technology is advancing by leaps and bounds, and the regulations take time to mature. Regulations take time to be revised, and so on. So, for example, till recently, if we talk of digital personal data protection, some of you may be aware that on 11th of August this year, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act has 2023 has come into being, approved by both the houses of the Parliament and given the assent by the President. This was a long overdue thing, something on the lines of the General Data Protection Regulation 2018 of the European Union. Till this regulation came into place, there was just one specific section, I think it's section 43A of the IT Act 2000, which spoke of data breach of the personal data which is being held by corporate houses. But that's where it ended. Now we have a whole full-fledged act addressing the digital personal data protection. So, but it has taken quite some time. The IT Act came about in 2000 with 2 amendments in 2008 and 18. But we are now in 23, and now the Digital Personal Data Protection Act is come. So I'm just trying to convey that the revision of regulations or getting about new regulations or new acts in place is not a joke actually. It takes a lot of time. Okay, so now I will touch upon the ecosystem of India and broadly the gaps that I see, and I'm further doing research in this subject as part of my PhD also. So if you now see the organizations, I've just collated on one slide. So we have a certain computer emergency response team, which is basically a response system to any cyber attack on government or non-government infrastructure or servers. In addition, certain is also responsible for doing proactive scans through an arm under it called the NCCC, which you can see in the 4th bullet, National Cyber Coordination Center, which works under the certain, and its primary task is to keep doing a proactive scan of the internet to be able to forecast some cyber attacks. Of course, all these states also have their certs on the line of the certain also. Then we have the National Cybersecurity Coordinator, whose as on date is Lieutenant General M.V. Nair. and he works in the national part of the National Security Council. And then we have the NTRO. All of you may be aware, National Technical Research Organization, working directly under the NSA. Under the NTRO, we have the NCIAPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. This was raised in, if I think correctly, it was raised in 2014, whereas NTRO was raised in 2000. The I4C, Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center, has been nominated as the nodal agency in the Ministry of Home Affairs for cybercrime, and it has got different, whole lot of 8 to 10 different verticals working on different aspects relating to cybercrime. Under the defense services, we have the Defense Cyber Agency, which was earlier called the DIRA, Defense Information Assurance Research Agency, which is now upgraded to DCYA. And in the private sector, we've got the Data Security Council of India. The ministries which are involved are PMO, MHA, MIT, Ministry of Law. If you look at the policy documents or the regulations which are in place in India, starting with the first one, of course, the most important is the IT Act 2000, and followed by 2 amendments in 2008 and 18. The National Cybersecurity Policy, you can see it's of 2013 vintage, almost a decade old. I think it's high time it needs to be revised. As late as 2 days back, I checked up on the website of MIT, but this is the latest document available on the website. The National Information Security Policy Guidelines, NISPG 2014, issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Guidelines for Protection of Critical Information Infrastructure, issued by the NCIAPC in 2015. The National Digital Communication Policy, issued in 2018 by the Department of Telecom. And of course, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, which was steered and spearheaded by the Ministry of Electronics and IT, and it has already become an act in August this year. We also have, all of you may be aware already, the Digital India Act is in the pipeline. In the month of March this year, a broad framework was put out for public consultation on the website, and in the end of November, the Minister of State, Mr. Pradeep has made a statement that Digital India Act is not happening anytime soon because it requires much more consultations. One major agenda of Digital India Act is to replace the IT Act 2000. This is what I read on the net, and however, he says that this is going to be taken up by the next government. It's there's no need to rush it to rectify this Digital India Act. So it is still in draft. So for ease of assimilation, I've just tried to put it in an organization chart. So from the top, if you see, we have the PMO, and under which we have the National Security Council on the left, NSC, under which we have the NCSC, that is National Cybersecurity Coordinator. On the right hand side, if you see under the PMO, we have the NTRO, and under the NTRO is NCIAPC. Then further we come to ministries, the Ministry of Electronics and IT, that is the leftmost block that you see. So as I said earlier, the National Cybersecurity Policy, NCSP, was issued in 2013 by MIT. The CERT-In and NCCC work under the MIT. As far as MHA is concerned, the National Information Security Policy Guidelines was issued by MHA in 2014, and the I4C, that is Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center, works under the MHA. The DOT has issued the NDCP, MOD, of course, the Defense Cyber Agency is under the MOD. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act was also spearheaded by MIT, like I said earlier, and the Digital India Act, which is in draft form as of now, is also being steered by the MIT. Now, I just want to highlight few disconnects here. There are a number of ministries and departments involved, each doing its own bit, and I think there is some requirement of consolidation or nomination of lead agencies, etc. So, for example, the critical information infrastructure is handled by NCIAPC, which is under the NTRO, under the PMO, whereas the non-critical information infrastructure falls under the mandate of CERT-In, which is under the MIT, and the proactive cyber scan is assigned to CERT-In. The National Cybersecurity Policy 2013 issued by MIT, the National Information Security Policy Guidelines issued by MHA, and the National Digital Communication Policy issued by DOT. Although it falls into their respective charters, but the three are highly interlinked as far as cybercrime is concerned. they cannot be dissociated. So there needs to be more coordination or some umbrella document or some consolidated document needs to be coming about. And now, of course, if you see the I4C, the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, under the MHA has been nominated as the uh, lead agency. So I strongly feel that there is a need for consolidation here and to bring about more coherence between the various ministries. And the statistics that I shared earlier from NCRB only go to prove that there is a need to review the ecosystem, whether it is organizations or it is policies or the IT Act itself. Incidentally, I just forgot to mention one thing, that when I was talking about the NCRB statistics of the cybercrime being about 56,000 in the year 2022, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Majority of the population or the corporate houses or the government agencies for that matter do not report, either for ignorance, out of ignorance, or out of in order to be able to save their reputation, especially the business houses. They don't want their reputation to be spoiled, or the government departments also. It is a matter of embarrassment. People don't report, or someone who's been it may be like public shaming for someone if he admits to that he's been attacked with a cybercrime, and there is some personal details or some personal preferences are involved, so people do not share. So because of this, so there was a report I was reading in Economic Times about 6 months back, that the actual number of cybercrime are actually more than probably 10 times over this, because of all these reasons. So NCRB publishes the data based on what cybercrimes have been reported. Okay, so now coming to another important aspect of my talk today is the IT Act. And generally, I've been reading the cyber laws of different countries, 5 to 6 countries I'm studying, and comparing with our IT Act. All the cyber laws are generally organized into 3 sections: the definitions, the offenses and the penalties, and lastly the procedures and powers with the adjudicating authorities. So this is just a very helicopter vision of, you see, in the table, the first column is the definitions. Then there are about 6 columns which are giving various cybercrime laws of various countries, including one important international convention called the Budapest Convention. So wherever you see a red, for example, if you see the second row, access provider, it is there in the South African model law, the definition, but it is missing in the IT Act. So wherever you see reds, this is what is missing in the IT Act. So I've just taken one sheet each of definition, and this is for the cybercrime part of the regulation. So wherever you see red, for example, illegal interception, it is defined in Singapore Act, but it is not there in IT Act of India. It is there in the United States and South African model also, and so on. So this is a deep down study that I'm doing. This is just one sample that I'm taking. So just to sum up, I think what are the domains to be addressed in order to strengthen our fight against cybercrime and reduce the cybercrime rate and enhance the conviction rates. So legal measures are, of course, in terms of review of IT Act, the digital personal data protection. Incidentally, while the DPDPA is pretty new, just about 4 months old, but I am also studying the DPDPA and comparing it with the only other global regulation available, that is the GDPR of the European Union. And I have been able to identify a few gaps here and there. There are a lot of guidelines and rules which are issued under the IT Act or by the NCI, PC or the ministries or the departments. Similarly, in times to come, we can expect a lot of rules and guidelines to be issued under the provisions of Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So all these need a review. Technical measures in terms of going in strongly for indigenization, the Atmanirbhar Bharat objective of the Prime Minister. I think in all our networks, slowly we need to have indigenized products. Because a lot of these foreign products leave trapped out and backdoors in their products, either in hardware form or in software form. We need to strengthen our network security and the endpoint security, increase public awareness. That is a big issue when people are not aware of how to avoid cyber crimes. Organizational measures in terms of consolidation of responsibilities, like I showed you that organogram where multiple ministries and departments are involved. So there is certain need for consolidation and nomination of lead ministries and review of policies. Like some of the documents are as old as about 9 to 10 years old. So they need to be looked into. Probably Digital India Act may address that. I'm not very sure. Or maybe the national capacity building in terms of cyber forensic facilities in quality as well as quantity. The more number of cyber professionals that we need to think of tapping into some new organizations like the RRU, the Rashtriya Raksha University, or the National Forensic Science University, in order to help us to build up the cyber professionals in the country. There may be a need to look at setting up some fast track cyber crime courts, and of course not to forget the very important aspect of training of the law enforcement officers and the judicial officers, because a lot of time it happens that people are not trained in collection of digital evidence, and it fails the legal framework, and the courts refuse to accept it. Then finally we come to cooperation, whether it is interstate cooperation within the country. So there needs to be a common platform for intelligence sharing. Of course, as far as trans-border crimes are concerned, it's high time that India looks very strongly and seriously at signing some international convention like the Budapest Convention, which came about way back. Almost, it's been 2 decades that this Budapest Convention has been in place. We have got bilateral cybercrime pacts with countries like US and Israel. So while US and Israel have signed the Budapest Convention, India is yet to sign, and there may be a lot of concerns within the government department. I understand. I have not been able to do a deep down study in that, but yes, in order to take the international cooperation ahead, and India, aspiring to be a global power in the next decade, as per the vision of the Prime Minister, I think there's a need for us to take lead and lead by example, actually, and sign this Budapest Convention with whatever changes we want. And also, I also understand that last 2-3 years since 2021, there is a UN Convention on Cybercrime, which is also now coming up. So I haven't read much about that, but yes, that is also a right direction in the right step. In fact, it should have happened long time back. While the United Nations has published a manual on cybercrime way back in 1995, and they address the cybercrime as under the overall umbrella of UNODC, that is United Nations Organization on Drugs and Crime. But it's good that they have become serious of late now, last 3-4 years, and the discussions on the cybercrime convention at the UN level have also started. So I think with that I come to end of my talk, and Jai Hind. These are my contact details. Anyone interested can kindly get in touch with me over mail or email or on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Tewari, for a wonderful and very detailed presentation, highlighting the various aspects of this India's ecosystem to fight the cybercrime. Besides, you have also mentioned about the various types of attack, definitely. But then more important is that what is the ecosystem in India? A lot of people don't know that what are the structures existing in the cybercrime, cyber disruptions, what is happening, and to control it. So therefore, and you have also very well deliberated on the documents and the acts, the overall legal paraphernalia existing, and very important thing what you have mentioned, that the conviction rate in the cyber crimes or the cyberspace criminal activities or whatever activities are happening which is not as per the law is less as compared to the physical state there. So it's good that we have a benchmark to compare, and we will be taking up all these things. And it was good that you have highlighted that the digital Digital India Act, it is under very shortly we'll see after the DPDP Act, people have become cautious. Industries have asked for time, and the requirements what you have highlighted, the legal, technical, organizational capacity and cooperation, all these things are definitely very, very important. And the way forward, what you have mentioned about the national cyber security strategy, cyber forensics, law enforcement, judicial, all these things will definitely require attention at the national and at the individual level too. Thank you very much, Brigadier Tiwari, for this elaborate presentation and enhancing our knowledge. Now, next speaker is Mr. Subimal Bhattacharjee. He's a policy advisor on cyber and technology issues, and had been a visiting scholar at Ostrom Workshop, Indiana University, Bloomington. He has just returned 10 days before from that, and he's on the editorial board of the Cyber Journal of Chatham House, London. Uh, he has several feathers in his cap. He had been uh, uh, the India representative or India country head of the General Dynamics in India, the US defense manufacturer. And also he had been an expert for the UN panel and a member of the research advisory network under the Global Commission on Internet Governance, headed by the former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt. And he was also on the governing body of Assam Don Bosco University and independent director in Centrum. He is a speaker, columnist, television commentator, and on strategic cyber security, national security, data security, and critical and emerging technologies. He has 700 publications and 400 appearances. Besides, he is a referee research papers for the Manohar Parikar IDSA. He is a documentary filmmaker too. And beside that, he has extensive qualifications and courses he has done in the cyber security. He's also done courses on the AI, also from IIT Kanpur as well as MIT in US. Over to you, Subimal, to enlighten us about how the global community is considering the cyberspace regulation, which is a very important considering the massive stakes the big platforms have. We read that the New York Times has sued the OpenAI and the Meta for using that data for it. So over to you, Subimal, to enlighten us and what is there in store for India for all this. Thank you. You are on mute, sir.
Thank you, Pradeep Gupta ji, for inviting me for this webinar. A very interesting topic, navigating the cyber frontier. 25 years back, it was very easy when we used to look at this space. Today, it's a very complex web. Every day, every moment, something changes, and we are having to deal with a plethora of issues. I also want to thank the Organization Security and Policy Initiative, SAPI. I think, as you have mentioned, this is your 9th webinar, and these are very important, to touch on topics of emerging importance and understand it, from a context of how India operates and how, the global community is gearing up and, trying to navigate, through this frontier. It was a very nice presentation from Brigadier Tewari, to set in context how things are in India and in the overall ecosystem, but more around the cybercrime scenario. But cybercrime is just one aspect. There are so many aspects around the whole ecosystem that we really need to look at, when we ourselves get into the overall global bandwagon, as well as, try and take things in the right direction in the country. I'm going to just come to my topic, but just wanted to, put the perspective also that, you have been connected and disconnected a few times today, as we started the webinar, so the quality of connectivity in many places still remain a very big issue. And then, of course, cyber crimes. Then, of course, the issues around the availability and the integrity of the networks, and going to the much wider worrying areas like cyber warfare, and using this domain also to force multiply whatever has been there, even from a formal warfare scenario, or trying to go by the back door, because cyberspace offers you the anonymity and the advantages of geography being absent. So with all of this, as situation, and as complex as the whole space is, where are things when it comes to the global community and regulations? That's also very, very important. We are still far away from having you can say, a global agreement or understanding about the whole issue of cyberspace. And I don't see it coming in the next few years very easily. And whatever I would have done professionally, or out of my interest in areas, but this has been one area that for 25 years I've been following as an individual scholar, or even whatever way I would have expressed. I don't see that coming very fast, and it is getting very complicated. It is being impacted by the geopolitics that is emerging. It is also being impacted by a lot of nations and trying to use these as another tool, to launch surreptitious attacks, either directly or through rogue elements and criminal syndicates. So, where are we in terms of regulation? Is regulation the ideal situation, or will regulations bring in the right deterrence? And where are the nations cooperating, or is it much out of the realm of nations, because there are so many stakeholders who have a very important role in keeping the medium of internet, and hence whatever happens to the digital space alive, available, with integrity, and moving forward. We must all remember one thing, that internet was initially conceived and still is considered as a medium that has to remain free. So it has to remain available to the larger domains. And as you had referenced, my recent research at the Indiana University was mostly around, how do you look at the commons aspect of the whole space, and how the responsible state behavior in cyberspace emerges, and and how do you look at regulating it from a perspective where it is considered as global commons. As most of you would know, that some efforts around regulations have started around the internet. You can say just as we went past the Y2K. So about 23 years back, we looked at the whole issue of Y2K in a very big way. We navigated it very well. India also did very well in that. But post that, one of the attempts was, as Brigadier Tewari had also mentioned, about the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime. Now, that was one of the first attempts to look at an issue which had global connotations, because as cybercrime typically could have 6 or 7 countries involved at the same time, and looking at all the legal jurisdictional issues, looking at how nations deal with each other, and of course the whole difficulty of attribution, which still remains a big technical issue when it comes to the internet medium. I think that was quite a bold move and an effort to get something on the table. But as Brigadier has also mentioned, India has still not signed it. Nothing wrong in that. We had a certain position. We stood by it. Many nations took many years. Even the US took a long time to finally ratify it. And as now the UN has kind of got into looking at cyber crimes more closely, but there is a reason that there are many other elements. I won't say apartheid, but there are a lot of countries, which still think, that they should navigate the whole aspect around. regulations or how the medium of internet in every form it is managed. So there is an impending politics that comes around geopolitics. That's possibly a dominant thing that I would see when it comes to the uh, regulatory efforts around cyberspace. Now, coming back from the 2001 effort and the many years that was lost, and yet we don't have a real agreement when it comes to even one aspect, say cybercrime. But one thing we must note that countries have started engaging more and more. Bilateral, multilateral, there are many initiatives and many agreements that have been signed. And to that end that it has come to such situations where even, NATO looks at the cyber domain in a very, very big way. And, we are already talking about where, the Geneva Conventions apply, or if an attack on a critical infrastructure of a certain country by another country could actually uh, come in the context of the laws of warfare, and if even kinetics could be launched based on such an attack by cyber means. So I think nations are now talking. One of the dominant threads in the last decade was to see, and maybe not even the last decade, even in the last 4-5 years also, the conversation was going around multilateralism versus multi-stakeholderism. So if you look at, it was tried to be seen that anything around the overall internet ecosystem cannot be looked at from a multilateral perspective, because the stakeholders are so many and everyone have to be on the table, particularly the private sector, which makes most of the or almost all of the equipments and network elements that form the whole internet infrastructure. And the way it is managed, the way the innovation and the overall ecosystem is emerging, they had to be factored in. Similarly, so many others, the law enforcement, the legal elements, everyone, the academic community. So almost every stakeholder you had to factor in, and the dominant nations like the Americans and the European countries have actually pushed across the multi-stakeholderism in such a way that many efforts of the UN in the initial years, you can say from 2005 onwards and all, were absolutely negated, and nothing really came up. So initially, how ITU couldn't get into this space became quite a interesting play. I used to go for many of these conversations in the 2005 to the 2008 time period, and I used to see that the Western nations' larger story was how to keep ITU away from anything around the the regulating or the sort of managing or coordinating anything around the digital infrastructure. So while ITU on the telecom front has been able to do I wouldn't say any qualifier like a good job or something, but it did a job. It kept all of the communications going seamlessly on. But when it comes to the digital space today, it is still a kind of a American domination, with all of the root servers, most of them in their countries and all, and by and large, the large American corporations, are dominating the whole of the business, whether it is around infrastructure or around the whole content ecosystem, and this still continues today. I don't say it is good or bad. I think a lot of the innovation from that country has really changed, how we communicate in this world, how we do business. I still think that the quality of the people and the techies that they're able to get into the system, give them the freedom, still allowed a Google or an Apple or everything to come up, despite we having the IITs and some of the best minds, but we still can't get anything of Google or anything in this country, despite all the aspirations and the intent. Whereas the same IIT fellow, when he goes to that country, is able to get his innovation to the front and able to, get to the top. So Sundar Pichai or Satya Nadella are the, the top two leaders right now in the digital leadership in the American corporation that you see. They couldn't have been anything what they are today if they have still remained. So we still have to think a lot about where we get into this whole ecosystem, as much as we might try and aspire and try to also try and show that now India is at the top in everything has changed right in the last few years. But I must say that foundationally many things around the internet happened also in this country in a very, very stable, steady way. Gupta ji is himself someone in the background who has worked so much. Our Aadhaar stories, or even right now, many of the functionalities that actually operate on authentication using Aadhaar are basically great stories that today we are able to sort of project the DPI story. But even if you go back for a moment and see that our rise or our acceptance or importance in the digital ecosystem has had a lot to do with the software exports, the IT-enabled services exports that have been going now, for 2 decades, always on a steady plane, a rather steady increasing plane where, the compounded annual growth has always been on the rise. And this is irrespective of the government. It has been an Indian story. It has been a story many times, bereft of, what the government policy was or what the government regulations was. So today, when Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar at the beginning of this month says that by 2026, 20% of the digital system or 20% of India's GDP would be on from the digital aspects or the digital ecosystem. But we have had a steady growth on the GDP from the software IT industry exports, the ecosystem within the country, all of that has been created, and the cascading impact across many other industries, because this engineers and techies delivered and and to a great extent delivered to countries and to corporations based on service level agreements, and not on something of a digital data protection bill that we just got. For the last 2 decades we have done well on the strength of the service level agreement, on the strength of the quality of the work of the techies and you can say the leadership around the corporation, much out of the great support of the government or government's involvement. But let me not take you on that path. We are still talking on the regulatory aspect. So on the regulatory aspect, if you saw that in the last 7-8 years, with China's rise and China's domination and China's focus on many aspects of the digital economy, suddenly nations started looking at the digital space or the overall cyberspace far much more closely from a regulatory perspectives. Business growth, the way the American corporations went around the world, garnered all of the business and put up ancillary, small partners here and there to do the local level stuff and everything, and whether it is hardware or software, that has been a great story for many, many years. But what you can see is that the regulatory regime is being shaped by the fear now that what China could do. When the Chinese corporations, or rather, we cannot use the word corporation, the companies like Huawei, etc., went out to the world and started also competing and getting a lot of business at much cheaper prices than what you got from the Western corporations. The fear really started because they started also taking the business away. But along with the business, the fear around they putting backdoors, bugs, traps, and everything and all, also started gaining ground. Not that, we can think that only these are the guys putting such stuff. There are many others also who do it. It's that the media and the way everything is shaped tries to show that our actual enemies are only the Chinese and everyone is our friend, but it is not so. If you go to and look at all the logs in whatever form it is coming around, in the face of the fact that attribution is still not 100% solved problem, still you would find that more of the logs would show Western attempts on our networks than actually Chinese attempts. So collectively, I think the story around who does what at the back door, and who plays around and everything and all the ecosystem is still an unsettled story, and there are many players and just not one. But when the fear around the Chinese dominance in this space has emerged, a lot of the bilaterals became wider multilaterals, and today on the global platforms, in many of the platforms, whether it is the multi-stakeholder platforms or even a little bit of preponderance of using UN networks to look at this, became far much more prominent. And the most recent phenomenon of all of this getting far much more pronounced is the emergence of artificial intelligence, or more so I can say the generative artificial intelligence. So in the last 1 year, you might have heard so much concerns around the the digital space, the doomsday, all of the kind of things coming in, because suddenly the prospects of generative artificial intelligence trying and coming and impacting everything has been put so much across from the Western nations and their courts and everyone, that it is now something on the regulatory table. But if you look and and a little bit or further into the past, you will see that much before the AI story has emerged, a lot of conversations also has been happening around the overall cyber story. So, what are the triggers that you would have seen? The group of governmental experts on the responsible state behavior on cyberspace. Now, this is something that has been very interesting, how it has evolved. It has a certain kind of a continuity, but it originally started as a Russian resolution in the UN General Assembly, way back in the early 2000, and then the couple of group of governmental experts initially went, without any kind of reports. I was also a part of an expert group around I think the second or the third, the 2009 group of governmental experts for the agenda setting. But post that, if you see that since the 2013 onwards, a certain kind of agreement was, really coming into shape about that. No, in spite of our differences, we need to look at the regulatory aspect. We need to look at how do we have a certain agenda, or do we have a certain way forward in place. I still remember in 2008 for the agenda setting meeting at Geneva at the UN, I saw a second secretary from the Indian mission, disarmament mission, just being present, whereas the Chinese had 5 and the Americans had 8, the Russians had 10 guys attending. So, I came back and reported to the people in the center that, this is our priority, where others are already shaping up. So, better this gets into a much wider area, because, apart from our software exporting credentials and all, we also need to get into this aspect, because internet has a lot to do with democracy, and we should also be seen as strategically emerging in this space. But nevertheless, if you saw from the group of governmental experts efforts, the final one which came out, the last one which came out in June 2021, where 11 norms of responsible state behavior in cyberspace were put out. Now, if I use the word put out, it might be wrong because the 2015 GG had already listed them, but it was finally shaped and digested and discussed among all the different interest groups. If you look in the uh, multipolar world today, if I may use the term, and then when it was put across, now what should be those, or how do you look at these 11 norms, how do you implement them? That became a kind of a base for global regulatory discussions going on. Subsequent to the GG report, the UN Secretary General also, or via a resolution, the UN open-ended working group of information and communication technology that was also set up for the 2021 to 2025 time frame. Now they are going to, or they are already deliberating a lot on, how do you, further develop the rules, norms, and principles for responsible state behavior in cyberspace, and all of the kind of initiatives that actually matter. When it comes to looking at cyberspace. What one thing I must tell you is that post 2025, what is a kind of a mechanism that you look at cyberspace? How do you look at it from a regulatory perspective? That's something very, very important and interesting. So while the group of governmental experts was confined to 25 countries, and India was also a part of it, the last one, in not all of the GG of the 25 or 20 countries, India was always a part. But it was a part of it. And then now the OEWG is far much wider. In fact, most of the nations can come and talk, give their points of view, even credible organizations or activist organizations, everyone who's there are putting across their thoughts about how this goes on. But a more kind of a formal or a regulatory atmosphere post 2025 OEWG, now that's also a question that is being looked at today when you look at the regulatory aspect. My study in Ostrom workshop in Indiana University was more looking at this, about what is an institutional mechanism on which this aspect is more permanent, and with Guptaji I can share a report later. But what I want to mention to you here is that parallel to this efforts at a UN level, which is far much more, you can say, broader and encompassing everyone, a lot of the multilateral groups are also now getting quite active when it comes to looking at issues of cyberspace and the regulatory mechanisms. If you follow the European Union for quite a more than a decade, they have been very active. The first one, if you look at the way they brought out the GDPR, which looked at the data very closely, and the way they implemented, the way they were the toughest always on many of these American corporations, in terms of penalizing them when they found deviations or a lot of those kinds of stuff when it came to the business angle. But if you look at them, they've just ratified and got the first Artificial Intelligence Act also in place earlier this month, after getting the European Parliament to pass it in June this year. So so they are also looking at a lot of issues around cyberspace in a quite close fashion. If you look closer home to the Quad again has been focusing on the critical and emerging technologies. A lot of efforts is going on to see how do you contain actually the China threat, even if you don't name China, but a lot of the Quad countries are actually facing a lot of threats when it came to the supply chain ecosystem around the digital space, or even when it came to the wider infrastructure ecosystem of the internet. So if you ask me to summarize in a sentence and all, the whole narrative around the regulatory aspects of cyberspace globally is sort of going around the geopolitics that you see in the physical world. Uh, you are still far away from a particular piece of agreement that you have. I have studied very extensively from a strategic and technical approach about where cyberspace fits in when it comes to regulation. So from a strategic, I've done a lot of comparative studies with the how the outer space, the deep sea, and the climate negotiations and agreements happen globally. So they are very wide and from a long-term perspective. So how this, or what are the elements that take them together? And from a technical perspective, how you look at the nuclear arena, or you look at even the civil aviation arena, because cyberspace also has this element of a quick response, and how do you look at it from a management perspective. So I think there's still some time. There will be a lot of more deliberations, but at least there is a lot of conversations globally now. It remains to be seen, whether it is the UN or out of UN, or how the nations come to a kind of a permanent dialogue or institutional mechanism when it comes to looking at cyberspace, more from a or from the perspective of regulatory regime, whether it could be an agreement that nations agree on and the stakeholders follow it also, or whether you have a institution that looks at this whole aspect. Whether you look at revamping the ITU, being now being a digital world, and it's more of analog functions almost reducing. So I think the need for or possibility of a UN digital organization, revamping of ITU, getting in a lot of the elements of the research that the UNIDIR, the disarmament organization of UN, does, possibly pulling both these two Geneva organizations together into one aspect, renaming it or whatever and everything. That also could be a possibility. But I think we are at the crossroads. I think just around 2025, we could see something emerging, but definitely everyone will want this space to be regulated or seen to be regulated, and India will be or will have to be a major player in all of these conversations. So in all of these conversations, when you go and sit on the global table and everything, you also have to do a lot of dressing up at home. Brigadier Tewari mentioned about the Digital India Act, which Mr. Chandrasekhar has mentioned, goes to the next government. You just saw the way in which the Indian Penal Code, the CRPC, and all of these things were passed by Parliament. It has a lot of digital aspects involved in it. You see that many provisions of the existing and the revised Information Technology Act, how they are regularly used or misused by various police forces, or the you can say the people ruling in the different states and all. So I think we'll have to do a lot of things, even looking at how do you make your systems far much more available with integrity. How do you deal with cyber crimes? How do you build up an ecosystem where people can communicate easily, rather than getting always on the wrong side of law, and at the same time how do you secure or on your networks and don't become the targets of domestic attacks or international attacks in either way. So it's a big task at hand. There are multiple organizations, as Brigadier Tewari listed in the slides. I think somewhere we'll also have to look at having a far much more clearer command structure when you look at all of the aspects of dealing with cybersecurity. So we are not, ignoring the fact. We are definitely conscious as a nation, or even within the government. But I think we need to do a far much more optimal exercise, so that parallelly the domestic aspects and all of the international, diplomacy, the regulatory regime, and all of that we participate, they have a certain coherence, and we emerge as one of the leaders in this space. So this is just I wanted to say, I'm sorry, Gupta ji, if I have exceeded time, but I'm available for questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Subimal, for this wonderful enlightenment of all of us about the global developments which is happening in developing the regulatory framework. Yeah, you rightly pointed out that about the geopolitics, linking it to the geopolitics, and that the internet has to be the baseline, or the bottom line is that it has to be for preserving the democracy, or the truthfulness what is there in the world. And of course, the one new thing that what you have told, that responsible state behavior. People used to think, and they are still, the states are responsible, but how will you put the responsible state behavior? Yes, somebody dictating everything, and while some nations are at the receiving end, whatever technical development they have, but then since the development of technology, the development of internet, the way it has happened over 30-40 years, it has been in control of certain nations. So that is where the multi-stakeholder, multilateral approach and will come into play. And let us see that how the nations struggle to regulate this system. And this regulation, no doubt, will have tremendous impact on India, because we have embraced the digitalization, and this is the way, this is the only I would say the channel through which India has progressed with leaps and bounds in last 2 decades or so, and in the recent times. So the regulation of the internet, we have to see that we have to be also a major stakeholder in this regulation. You rightly pointed out several times about the ITU, and we have to be there. Professor H.B. Srivastava is there. We participated in a seminar in IT Delhi. And the control over ITU, I don't say that India will control, but then they set the protocols of the hardware, and that will dictate lot of things on the regulation of the internet or the cyberspace. So that's all. I'll not take much time. I'll just request Sangeeta, the co-founder, to take up the question answer. There are some questions and answers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gupta. Actually, I have got a long queue of our participants eager to ask questions. So I'll begin with Ms. Lakshmi Pandit. Ms. Pandit, would you ask, or do I ask it on your behalf?
Yes, ma'am. So may I go?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Lakshmi and I'm currently a research scholar, and I'm working on the area of AI adoption in the healthcare, particularly how the AI adoption is going right now. So, sir, my question is, according to your opinion, so what is the relation between the AI adoption and if there is a need for a robust cybercrime mitigation system, especially in context to Indian healthcare? I just want your comment. Like, you have already given an example of deep fake. So my question is to Mr. Tewari, sir. So as you have already given the example of deep fake, so sir, would you like to comment? Is there a need for a robustness? What would you say?
Brigadier
Yeah,
Saurabh.
I don't think any of us has any doubt that there is need for robustness in all these domains, like adoption of AI, and because AI is also leading to a lot of cyber crimes. So there is some work already going on across the globe. For example, just last month only, I think the European Union has finalized the some meetings and come up with a draft AI Regulation Act. So it has not yet become a formal document, but the discussions are going on, and more or less now all the EU members are on board with that draft. This is as recent as I think last week of November.
Yes, sir.
Also, the word specific to your query regarding adoption of AI in health, the World Health Organization did a deliberation for as long as about 18 months. And in the month of June or July this year, if I recollect correctly, they have come up with a AI governance and regulation document. If you search for it on the net, I think you'll get it, and that may be a very good input to your research also. And of course, some of the uses of AI that I see in healthcare is, like prediction of diseases based on certain patterns and interpretation of scans and medical images. It may also help to streamline the administration. It is already helping in development of new medicine and new therapies for certain queries. AI in healthcare, the industry, I just checked on the net, is about $11 billion in 2021, and it is slated to grow to about $180 billion by the end of this decade, that is 2030. The challenges of cybercrime in healthcare industry are actually scary. It is not just related to, like I was mentioning earlier, one of my slides I show you attack on healthcare, like the AIMS database server was hacked or the ICMR database server was hacked. Now think of a scenario where a hacker gets control. It may actually be a state level war waged. Let's say a country hacks into AIMS database, and what they do is that they mingle up the blood group database. I am B positive, and when I go for treatment in AIMS, I am put on A positive blood if I need some blood. So it may actually be fatal.
Yeah.
So the implications are actually very scary. And if you recall, I was talking of non-kinetic warfare. This is non-kinetic. You don't need to actually do any kinetics. Although some of these misconceptions about non-kinetic being the mainstay have actually been put to rest in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is going on since last February. I think this February now 2 years will be completed. And even in the Israel-Gaza, this thing, the kinetics is here to stay. I'm just digressing a little bit, being a military man myself. So, my own fundamentals have been cleared because I was a strong proponent that, okay, it will be non-kinetic, non-kinetic, non-kinetic. But I think even my perceptions have been cleared now. But nevertheless, the scenarios that I'm painting for, cybercrime in healthcare is actually mind-boggling and very, very scary. So yes, there is a need, and the European Union has taken a lead, and they are working on a AI regulation. So, and like someone said earlier, I think Mr. Gupta or Mr. Subimal said that there is a AI ministry coming up, probably in Indian government, in addition to the Ministry of IT. So all these efforts are going, on all fronts, on multiple fronts, to make the ecosystem more robust. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tiwari sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pradeep,
Thank you, sir.
for
Thank you, Mr. Pandit. Yeah, we have yet another very interesting question, which is from Mr. Ravneet Singh about the privacy regulations. So, Mr. Ravneet Singh, would you ask or I ask on your behalf?
I can ask my question. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Mr. Geeta. It's really a wonderful session. The question that I'm asking is directly coming from the United States. The US has many regulations and many programs in place for organizations, as well as the industry in different domains to prevent cybercrime. So how do they really penalize organizations not doing enough to prevent cybercrime? How do they protect consumer and people data? NIST and HIPAA being one of the examples. Is India anytime coming soon with its own internal policy and regulations to prevent cybercrime and penalize organizations who are not doing enough? Is there something that's going on in this regard? That's the question that I have.
Yeah, Subimal, you are on mute.
Is the question meant for me or
you take, and I think Brigadier Saurabh will also contribute something to it.
Sure, thank you. So, Mr. Ravneet Singh ji, the whole intent behind the personal data protection, legislation that has come is to look at the whole of
just sorry to Ravneet is, I think, working in Finland in the cyber space only.
Oh, very nice. Lovely to hear that.
In the United States, sorry to interrupt.
So the effort is there. The whole intent behind the legislation is to look at everything from every aspect, and how you look at handling personal data, and how organizations have to behave, and how organizations can be penalized. So basically, the data fiduciaries, how they handle the data, and if the misuse and all, what are the penal provisions, and all of that is covered in there. So I think that's quite comprehensive. The whole intent, otherwise, also besides this piece of legislation, is to be able to cover every aspect of dealing with data. So even before this was there, even within the provisions of the IT Act and the relevant IT rules, on a wider, comprehensive aspect, data was always considered, and there are many also instances of action being taken under the provisions of the Information Technology Act, and also the relevant other acts, whether it came from a criminal perspective or even from a civil perspective. I would answer that much. Thank you.
Brigadier Saab, Brigadier Tewari would like to add something to it?
Yeah, I just want to amplify on the DPDPA, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Like the earlier the GDPR, the previous document of EU, the GDPR, it spoke of penalties on breach of any rules to the tune of few $1 billion or some percentage of the annual turnover of that particular company. So if we correlate with DPDPA, in the schedule of the DPDPA, there are penalties as high as about almost 250 crores to the tune of 250 crore, depending upon the level of violation. The penalties are ranging from 50 crore right up to 250 crore. So these kind of penalties are there, and actually the whole intention of bringing about DPDPA is to get into the domain of actually making the personal data protection issue more serious, and making the regulation very, very serious, because like I said earlier in my talk, on section 43A of IT Act 2000, it just spoke in 4 lines about how digital data is to be protected. But now we have a whole act coming out of those 4 lines. So this itself is a way to show, like, for example, you are mentioning the HIPAA, I can see in the chat box here. HIPAA is specific to the Health and Human Service Department of the United States, and it only talks about the data contained with them, whereas our DPDPA is actually all encompassing. It is not just addressing the medical data held with the healthcare industry, but it is related to, it is applicable to all industries across the board. So I think India has done very well on this domain. Similarly, Singapore also has got, in fact, just to amplify one more aspect, I think this will be taken care of in the Digital India Act. A lot of private players actually, they do not report data breach. In the Singapore Cybersecurity Act, in fact, they actually have a separate Cybersecurity Act for critical infrastructure. They have a normal Cybersecurity Act, and they have a separate act for addressing critical infrastructure, because they see it totally differently. So I think all these regulations are slowly building up, and with the current government, working on the Digital India Act also, which will actually encompass, give an umbrella, regulation to all these aspects. I think the future for India, as I see, is pretty bright. A lot of things have happened. In fact, just on the sideline, while I'm doing research, I have to make a lot of efforts and invest a lot of time to keep up the pace with the changes which are happening in the government. For example, till last year, I was working on this DPDPA kind of thing, drawing analogy from GDPR. Now suddenly this DPDPA has become an act, so it is no more a void. So I have to review my whole research. Actually, I'm trying to find out the voids in IT Act 2000, and suddenly this Digital India Act may come about before completion of my research, and I will again be catching up as to find out new voids. So that only goes to show, I think, that India in the last 8 to 10 years, I think, is going strong on these fronts.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
so much.
And here is not the last actually, but then because of paucity of time, we will take it up as last question, sir, from Professor H.V. Srivastava. And this is really interesting about data privacy versus data surveillance. May I ask both the speakers to please react on this?
Professor
Professor Srivastava,
Srivastava, I'll just introduce you. Professor Srivastava, he is a distinguished scientist of DRDO, and IT Delhi has been nice enough to use the services of such distinguished persons. And he is professor of practice in IT Delhi, and leading the integration of defense research into the academia and other industry that complete operation. Yes, Professor Srivastava.
So, good afternoon, everyone. This is actually a non-practitioner's question. I am not from this field. My field is optical engineering. Uh, Last year, if you recall, there was a lot of debate about Pegasus. And finally, what came out of it or nothing came out of it, all that is a question mark. Now, this data privacy versus the surveillance that the state requires to do to prevent the crimes, because cyber crimes can actually cripple the whole nation also if they get into the banking or some similar aspect. So, what is the thought process? Since the regulations are different in different countries, what we consider as a crime here, maybe another country may not consider the crime in some other place. So, what are the thought processes in different countries, and are we going to have a multilateral kind of forum at some point of time to prevent such things to happen, or what is the kind of thing is being done? That is number one. And secondly, technology uh, can naturally the technology is behind it, behind the crime also. But how can technology be utilized for preventing this? Is there any organization working in that area, identifying which are the gaps, and then who is going to plug them?
Subimal, you start, and then Brigadier Tewari will also tell, because from the global and then Indian.
Sure, Gupta ji. Thank you, Professor Srivastava, for your questions. It's the first part is very interesting because different countries have different yardsticks, and even if you look at democratic countries, which by and large you don't want any kind of surveillance really on a citizen surreptitiously or even within the ambit of law. I think internet or the technologies that has emerged, which play around the whole media of internet, gives them a far much bigger advantage or handle to actually do surveillance in far much ways in which laws and regulations really maybe cannot catch up, or even if they catch up, they are very difficult to actually pinpoint. So we still have a black hole around Pegasus. We have a Supreme Court appointed monitoring committee on what yardsticks they actually went and looked at it, is still been questioned by many techies. And at the end of the day, you still don't know, what happened, So, and Pegasus story is still not over. Pegasus story is still, happening here and there, whether here or even outside. So I think if you look at how nations are looking at it, I don't think anything really is much on the public domain in terms of a kind of a comparative study or anything like that. But what I can say is the Americans have been trying to go much beyond what they have all these been years doing through the Communication Decency Act, and now they are trying to get into the act of going after the big tech, or even overall the whole tech ecosystem in terms of a regulatory perspective. The Europeans have been very prompt. The Europeans have been quite tough, and I think the Americans are now trying to think and say that even if we don't do, but somebody has been doing, and our corporations are getting into a point that they have become more powerful than governments and nations. So hence, we have to regulate them. So in the part of the larger uh, ecosystem of trying to see that things are under control. Anything around surveillance, anything around where technology comes and plays in a government or how it plays in a nation, that's under focus. So if you look at the last few attempts in US, how they are trying to look at the AI regulatory space, because AI certainly has uh, come as not as a shock, but the possibilities to do so many things are uh, clearly much is jumped much above the thinking that the way in which a regulatory regime or government thinks, and also suddenly many things are far much possible. So if you see the efforts of the Senate leader Chuck Schumer, the 8 rounds of informal discussions that they've had with the range of the large tech companies. If you look at the way the president's directive around AI has been set and all, the effort is to be able to draw a certain line. That drawing of line, of course, gets the stump of the regulatory push from the top, but it's also a lot to do around how the industries also behave themselves. So I think this is still a very emerging subject, but I think this is a very worrying subject, because suddenly citizen space to communicate everywhere is getting shorter, and you are kind of restricting yourself from trying to freely express yourself. So at the end of the day, where you still think freedom as one of the major uh, aspects of human life or human rights, technology is coming in and throttling that, and very many times even helpless against regimes and the way they are using it, because suddenly laws and rules and regulations still fail to prevent this. You are possibly doing things after an event, but you are still not able to use the laws and regulations as deterrents from such kind of captures actually happening. uh, Second part, technology to prevent crimes. There are many organizations working, not only the activist organizations, which are very quite strong in the US or, even in the European nations. But I think, technology itself to uh, handle technology is definitely emerging and has been playing a role. So I think
This question
it.
was in context of India.
Yeah.
I
Brigadier
think
Tewari talked about so many organizations. So out of them, which organization is actually looking at the technology gaps and then to prevent that gap to widen or shorten that rather?
so. It's Brigadier
Yeah.
Tiwari will answer.
Yeah.
Brigadier
So,
Tiwari,
firstly, I'll briefly touch upon the surveillance part. Also, every regulation that comes into being, whether it is India or and anywhere across the globe, I think it is a double-edged sword. The government, while bringing about the regulation, has to strike a balance between the fundamental rights of the citizens and on the other side, ensuring the sovereignty and security of the nation. So just to give you an example, let's say the IT Act 2000, there was earlier, initially there was just one section 66, which spoke of, giving some information leads to public damage. In 2008, this 66 actually got broken up into 6 different parts, 66A, B, C, D, E, F. Then in 2018, based on a Supreme Court judgment of 2015 in the famous Shreya Singhal case, this 66A, which was being blatantly misused on these aspects, is already there on the internet. And if you see, certain articles about the review, which have come about in the last 2-3 months after issue of this act in August 2023, a lot of people are cribbing about this aspect. So as time passes by and more rules and guidelines come about, so I think this is a tight walk that the government has to do. The next part is the organization. In my study, whatever I have seen till now, there is no dedicated organization per se. So use of technology is on, as I see it, it is on 2 fronts. One is to secure our own systems. our networks, our servers, etc., so that one cannot hack them or takes a lot of effort to hack it. That is one part of the use of technology. So in that, I think a lot of private and government organizations are making use of experts, and they are taking consultancy from big companies to secure their network. But there also, in government department, it's okay because the money is of the government. It is not going from my pocket. But if you see it from the industry perspective, the private players, a very dear friend of mine, ex-army, and the return. So he has to actually weigh the seriousness of the threat and then accordingly invest money. He cannot pump in money like the government can or the Indian Army can. I have been in cybersecurity and managing of IT and telecom network of the Indian Army for 35 years of my service. So we never thought about money. In fact, I don't know, so some of you may be aware that Ministry of Defense always. And another aspect of technology is to use technology to be able to predict cybercrime. So I'm not very sure, but probably organizations like the National Cyber Security Coordination, which is under the MIT, I said earlier, under the certain, there's a NCCC, National Cyber Coordination Center. The primary task of NCCC is to keep doing the proactive cyber scan and keep predicting if any cyber attack is building up. So I'm very sure, given the technology, they might be using artificial intelligence based tools or some predictive tools based on quantum theory and so on, to be able to predict that, okay, if this kind of traffic pattern is building up, it is an indicator for some attack to take place in the future. But as of now, I am not aware of any dedicated organization which is, in fact, you may be surprised to know that even in the DRDO, there is a dedicated vertical for electronic warfare. But to the best of my knowledge, the DRDO does not have a dedicated vertical for cyber as of now. They handle it as part of the electronic warfare vertical. So that is the information
we
that
now
I
have.
Now,
we now have an organization called CIRA in the MOD. This is for the MOD, managed by DRDO. But they are also for prevention. Not for prevention. They are for doing this kind of surveillance. What is happening? Is there anything going to happen?
Okay, sir.
But the technology gaps and then addressing those technology gaps may not be by DRDO or organizations like DRDO, but that will be done by the agencies like IITs or IISc, the basic research, where they can actually build in the technology to prevent the crime. So that is where I find there's a lack between the government organizations, which can actually do this job because they get the data. Private agencies don't get the data. Neither do our academic institutions get the data. It's very different when you are working in the government and when you work in an academic institution. The data sharing does not happen between the organizations. Maybe good reasons, but then that's what it is. So I think if we can recommend, the SAPI can recommend to the government that one organization that looks at the critical technology gaps, and then those gaps are publicized or in some way they are conveyed to the researchers in IITs and IISc, it will be a good way forward.
Noted, Srivastava Saab. This is a very important point what you have mentioned. Initially, I thought that the NTRO, what we've been set up almost 18 years ago, it was given this responsibility, but then somehow it didn't happen. And very rightly, you have mentioned, and we'll at an appropriate forum, we'll tell them that convey that outcome of this particular webinar, that this has been observed, and you may, because the key people who had the knowledge in this domain, they have deliberated and come to this conclusion. Thank you very much, Sir.
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
I think there are multiple questions, but I think if speakers are eminent speakers, they may have other commitments.
So, I think it's already almost nearing 2 hours. So, let us close it at this, and I thank Subimal and Brigadier Tewari, Professor Srivastava, General Matharu had also participated in it, and he was DGIS of the Army. He's there. Still, Matharu Sahab, you like to ask something?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, firstly, for inviting me to attend this very, very informative, and I would say in some way seminal sort of a webinar, and the speakers have been amazing. No, I really don't have any question to ask, but since you have given me a little bit of time, I must say that the whole thing, we have to be the narrative builders. So that means we should be ahead of the curve so that people are regulating our technology. That's all really. And we have everything in place. We just have to make it happen. So
Yes.
once, like if you look at the way the Silicon Valley now, Europe is playing catch up. They are trying to regulate what the companies have already done. So no, that's a very happy place to be in. And since I am myself running a think tank where we look at the military aspect of maintenance, so it is very important that we build the technologies and we regulate from a position of power. And then we will be world leaders. Then people will be coming to us for asking us how to formulate things. See, when you have such capabilities, then you really can set the very tone of regulation. Of course, Brigadier Tewari has very, very beautifully brought out the various challenges which are there. So those we are aware of. That's all really I have to say. And I must say that this new word, cognitive warfare, which you mentioned,
Yes, sir.
is amazing. And I must say, what I learned from today was that Mr. Subimal, what he said was that service level agreements really drove the development of the industry. You see, so once you have such things in place, once you allow this to happen, and you build the industry to a level, and you are ahead of the narrative, the world's narrative, and we are right now, and that also answers the questions why our people are able to go outside and do very well, right? And so the reason is when you are building the narrative, then they'll be coming back here. I myself have studied abroad for my master's in UK, and in 1986 I discovered, that there is so much potential in a country which is not tapped. So I would say that bring in technology first, be the leaders, then look at regulation, not the other way around. That's my little bit of 2 minutes you gave me, so I said that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Matharu. Thank you again, Brigadier Tewari, Subimal, Professor Srivastava, General Matharu, and General Ashok Kumar is also there. Ravneet is there. Lakshmi, I can see, and there are several more from MDI and other places. Rakesh is from Airport and so many other friends. So thank you very much for this. And certainly we had some good lessons from this. Like General Matharu has suggested, Professor Srivastava has suggested, Brigadier Saab ne apne kai cheezon mein he has told about it. Subimal has enlightened us about the global thing, and we'll carry forward, and some kind of outcome will be there on our YouTube channel as well as on the website in the video links also. So I'll not take much time and end it here. It's almost 2 hours we have been engaging, though there were some technical glitches as it happens in this webinar, such kind of webinar. So thank you very much for gracing this occasion and supporting us in this webinar. Thank you. Thank you.